Hi there, welcome to Chemistry. I'm Jeremy Krug, and in this video, we're going to be learning about some interesting things that happen to liquids and to gases. Well, in the first interesting phenomenon here, this is something called vapor equilibrium. And this is something that takes place when you have a closed container and you have a liquid in there, and the rates of vaporization and condensation are equal. So imagine that you have a closed container, maybe of water or of some other substance there, and you put a piece of perhaps of plastic over it. You have some kind of covering there. And we know that inside there will be evaporation, evaporation, and eventually there'll be some condensation as well. And when there's evaporation and condensation, you know you have vapor equilibrium. Now let me show you an example of this. It might be hard to see here, but this is a picture of a food container, and it's closed. And I want you to notice that right around here, do you see that there are droplets of moisture? Those droplets of moisture there are telling us that vapor equilibrium has been achieved. So if you have leftovers that you put in the fridge, and then the next day you take them out, you open that lid, underneath the lid, you're going to find some moisture, aren't you? And that's because there's vapor equilibrium. That explains why you cover food. You don't just put uncovered food, like uncovered spaghetti, just a bowl of that in the fridge, because it's going to evaporate and dry out, right? You don't want your food to dry out, so you put the lid on there because you want to have vapor equilibrium. That's a good thing. So that's an example of a phenomenon that happens to liquids. Let's talk about hydrogen bonding. This is probably one of the most important intermolecular forces that's out there. It's a very strong intermolecular force that involves molecules with hydrogen and nitrogen, oxygen, or fluorine. Now, the reason why we're talking about this here in first year chemistry is that when we think about, let's say, water. Water is a very light molecule as far as molecules go. It has a molecular mass of about 18 atomic mass units, and it's a liquid at normal room temperatures. If we think about other substances that are similar to it as far as in their atomic weight or molar mass, I should say, we could compare that to methane, CH4. It has a molecular mass of 16 AMU, but it's a gas, isn't it? Or we could talk about, even carbon dioxide, which is really a lot heavier than either of these. It's about 44, and it's a gas, Or we could think of oxygen. It's got a mass of about 32, and it's a gas. Water is one of the lighter ones up here, almost the lightest, but it's a liquid. You might expect the one that is so light to be a gas, but that's not how it is. What's going on here? Well, what's happening is in water molecules, it has a structure that looks kind of like this. It has this polar structure to it. It has all these electrons over here give this side of the water molecule a negative partial charge, and this other side a positive partial charge. And if you have a neighboring water molecule over here, well, guess what? This is a positive side here, that's a negative. And guess what? There's a very strong intermolecular force between the negative side on this molecule and the positive side over here. So it is a very strong force. And so we can say, let me change colors so we can kind of illustrate that. There's a really strong force in there. That's the hydrogen bond. Very strong intermolecular force. And in order to have that, you need to have a molecule that has a hydrogen bonded to an oxygen, a hydrogen bonded to a nitrogen, or hydrogen bonded to a fluorine. And so one of the easier ways to look for something like that is look for a molecule that has both hydrogen and has N, O, or F in it. That's a good way to know if something's going to have hydrogen bonding. F, O, and N, you can think of phone, F-O-N, if you forget those. So does water have hydrogen bonding? Why, definitely it does. We just gave that as our example, didn't we? So that is a yes. How about ammonia, NH3? Does that have hydrogen bonding? Why, yes, it does. It has hydrogen, and it's bonded to an N, O, or an F. So that's good. What about H2SO4? Yes, that has hydrogen bonding as well. It has hydrogen. It's bonded to the oxygen. It has something else in there. It has a sulfur, but that's okay. It's okay for it to have other things too. How about H2S? Does that have hydrogen bonding? No. Because it has the hydrogen, but it doesn't have nitrogen, oxygen, or fluorine. So that is a no. And what about nitrogen dioxide? Does that have hydrogen bonding? No. It has nitrogen and oxygen. It doesn't have hydrogen, right? You got to have hydrogen to have hydrogen bonding. So let's talk about surface tension. This is a different property, something else that happens to liquids. It's the tendency of a liquid to form a sphere. So how does that work? Well, liquids that have strong intermolecular forces will have a strong surface tension. So what that means is if we have a beaker, let's say we have a beaker of water here. The molecule that's right there in the middle has pretty much an equal attraction to all the molecules around it. They're pretty much in all directions. But if we look at a molecule that's exactly on that surface, right there on that surface, well, guess what? It has attractions to all of the molecules around it, but there really aren't any molecules of water above it to speak of. So that molecule right there has a net downward force. And guess what? All the other molecules that are at the surface have this net downward force as well. So that kind of helps us explain why water has this almost feels like a skin. And so animals, like insects, are able to walk on water. Now, how does that explain why water forms raindrops? Well, if we keep on going here, if we look at the molecule that's perhaps, let's say right here on the edge, on the edge of that beaker there. Well, it has attractions, I guess we could say rightward, because there really are no water molecules to the left of it to speak. And then the ones over here have kind of a leftward force, and the ones here on the bottom have a net upward force to the other water molecules. So we can see that there's this net inward force. These water molecules on the edge have this inward force. And guess what? That's why molecules tend to have this nice spherical droplet shape, right? And here is a picture that was taken in a spacecraft, in a space shuttle, I believe, many years ago. And we can see this thing that looks like a ping pong ball is actually a fairly large droplet of water. Notice how perfectly spherical that droplet of water is. That's because you're in that microgravity situation in space there, and so you don't have gravity causing your water droplet to sag. That's not a very good picture of it, but we have much more gravity affecting things here that pull things downward on the Earth's surface. You aren't in free fall like you are in the space shuttle, so we have that sagging of water droplets. So that's surface tension. There are lots of neat things you can do with surface tension. You can float a paper clip on water because of surface tension if you're very careful. You can even float a coin on top of water sometimes if you're very careful. That's because you have that nice surface and that there's a tension in there. Let's take a look at another property of liquids, and that's capillary action. And capillary action is the upward rise of a liquid through a narrow tube. So perhaps you've seen something like this before, where you can take liquids of different colors and put a stalk of celery in there and watch the food coloring go up, it actually causes the leaves to change color. So that's kind of a neat thing there. It works when you have a very narrow tube. So I'm going to zoom in here and imagine that we have a narrow tube. And so we're going to immerse this tube into some water. So I got some water in here. Maybe that's a beaker or something. And we have water molecules. Well, guess what? The water molecules are there. And as it turns out, water has greater attraction to glass than it has to itself. So guess what? We're going to have the water droplets here sticking to the sides of that container more readily than to itself. It forms this meniscus. Now, water does have a pretty strong intermolecular force. So guess what? It's going to kind of pull this back up to level, and then the process is going to repeat. The molecules will stick to the glass again, but then it's going to repeat. It's going to pull the level up of the water, just like that. And then it's going to keep repeating. It sticks to the side of the glass. So we have this nice meniscus here. And it pulls it up. Eventually, if you have something, if the glass tube is narrow enough, it can go pretty high up here. The narrower the tube, the better the surface tension works normally. So if you have a fairly wide tube, you aren't going to see a whole lot of lift there. We can see that in stalks of celery and trees and plants. There's some capillary action going on. There are some other things happening too that you probably learn about in biology, but there is some capillary action in these as well. It helps us to explain why a towel will dry you off. If you get out of the bathtub or the shower, you use a towel to dry yourself off because the plants that most of the towels are made with, have that capillary action, so it can dry you off. You don't have to just stand there and wait for the water to evaporate off of your body. Or these capillary tubes that they sometimes use at the doctor's office to draw blood, or to get a small blood sample. Those are an example of capillary action. Well, the last thing I'd like to share with you in this chapter is a type of graph called a phase diagram. Now, every compound has its own phase diagram. Now, this is the phase diagram for carbon dioxide. And since this is just a first-year chemistry course, I want to go over this fairly quickly and without a whole lot of detail. But basically, this phase diagram tells us at which temperatures and which pressures each of the three phases will exist at for this substance. So if we want to know, what is going to be the phase for carbon dioxide at 1 atmosphere and 20 degrees Celsius. Well, 20 degrees Celsius is, somewhere in here, I'm saying, somewhere between minus 56.4 and 31.1 degrees Celsius. And 1 atmosphere is right here, and that is in not a very straight line, but it's right in the gas phase right there. So we would say it is a gas. And you can do that for any temperature and pressure on a phase diagram. It's actually pretty neat that you can take any temperature and pressure and find out what state of matter you'll have for that substance. I want you to notice that we have a couple of points on here. There is one point where all three of the states of matter converge. That is called the triple point. At the triple point, you can have solid, liquid, and gas existing at the same time. So that means that you could see sublimation, you could see deposition, freezing, melting, you could see boiling, you could see condensation. All of those would be taking place at the same time, but you'd have to get carbon dioxide to exactly 5.11 atmospheres and negative 56.4 degrees Celsius. It's kind of hard to get those exact conditions of the triple point, but there is a state where that will happen. Now, there's this other point up here. I want you to notice that there's this point where the liquid-gas border just kind of stops, and that's called the critical point. And the critical point is the highest set of conditions for which a liquid can exist. So, for example, the critical point for carbon dioxide is 31.1 degrees Celsius and 73 atmospheres, which is a pretty high temperature. Now, that's interesting because that means that at temperatures higher than 31.1 degrees Celsius, you cannot liquefy a gas. And that's important in industry because when you transport a gas, you normally don't transport it as a gas at all. You actually liquefy it by jacking up the pressure. So, back here in these lower pressures, we can liquefy gas by jacking up the pressure enough, and it just turns into a liquid. Above the critical point, you can't do that. No matter how high you got the pressure, it could be, 100 atmospheres, 1,000,000 atmospheres, you would not be able to liquefy carbon dioxide. So that's actually a fairly important point. At temperatures and pressures above the critical point, you have this thing called a supercritical fluid, which it's not really a liquid, but it's a very highly pressurized vapor. At those conditions, you can do some pretty neat things with certain substances. Now, the phase diagram for water, I want to put in here because water is the one that we use all the time. So the triple point for water is right there. It's 0.01 degrees Celsius and 0.006 atmospheres. And so that's the triple point for water. The critical point isn't really shown very well on here, but it seems to be right there. So those are phase diagrams. We've talked about some of the interesting things you can do with liquids, the properties, like capillary action, vapor equilibrium, what hydrogen bonding is. If you learned something, please hit that thumbs up button. I have been teaching chemistry for over 20 years, and I hope to see you again on my channel. I'm Jeremy Krug. Thanks for watching, and join me again where we can learn some more chemistry together.